The card turned over with a sound that shattered Delilah Jensen's world, and she watched as three aces stared back at her from the green felt table, sealing her fate in a smoky saloon on the edge of Watsonville, California, in the summer of 1883. She had been so certain her two pairs would win, so desperate to cover her father's debts, that she had wagered the one thing she should never have put on the table: her freedom. The contract she had signed in a moment of foolish confidence now belonged to Victor Castellano, a wealthy landowner whose reputation for collecting human assets was whispered about in every corner of Monterey County. His smile was all teeth and triumph as he reached across the table to claim the signed document, his rings glinting in the lamplight. "A pleasure doing business with you, Miss Jensen," Victor said, folding the paper into his vest pocket. "My carriage will collect you tomorrow morning at 8. I trust you will be ready." Delilah's throat constricted. The saloon walls seemed to close in around her, the smoke thicker, the laughter of other patrons crueler. She had just signed herself into indentured servitude for 5 years to pay off her late father's gambling debts, debts she had only discovered after his death 3 months prior. The bank had been threatening to take their small ranch, and she had thought she could win enough to save it. Instead, she had lost everything. She stumbled from the Silver Dollar Saloon into the warm California night, the coastal air doing nothing to clear her head. Stars dotted the sky above the valley, indifferent to her misery. Her hands shook as she gripped the porch railing, fighting back tears. She was 22 years old, and her life had just become someone else's property. That was a rigged game. The voice came from the shadows to her left, deep and certain. Delilah spun to find a man leaning against the saloon's exterior wall, his hat tipped low over his eyes. Even in the dim light spilling from the windows, she could see the strong line of his jaw, the broadness of his shoulders beneath a worn leather vest. "What did you say?" she managed, her voice hoarse. He pushed off the wall and stepped into the light. He was tall, probably in his mid-20s, with dark hair that touched his collar and eyes that caught the lamplight like polished steel. A gun sat easy on his hip, and everything about him spoke of hard miles and harder lessons learned. "I said it was rigged. I have been watching Castellano work that same con for the past hour. He has a man who signals him from across the room, and the dealer is in his pocket. That deck was marked, and you never had a chance." Horror and hope warred in Delilah's chest. "Can you prove it?" "Probably not in any way that would hold up if we got the sheriff involved. Castellano owns half the law in this county." He took another step closer, and she could see his face more clearly now. There was something honest in those eyes, something that made her want to trust him even though she had just learned the hardest lesson about trust a person could learn. But there might be another way. "What way?" Delilah asked, desperate enough to listen to anything. "I play him. Winner takes that contract." She laughed, a bitter sound. "And why would you do that? You do not even know me." He was quiet for a moment, studying her face. "My name is Isaac Armitage. I knew your father, Thomas Jensen. He helped my family once when we were passing through 5 years back. My mother was sick, and he let us stay at your ranch for 2 weeks while she recovered. He would not take a dime for it. I owe him a debt, and I always pay my debts." The memory surfaced slowly. She had been 17, helping her mother tend to a woman with fever while 2 men worked their cattle in exchange for room and board. One had been older, graying at the temples. The other had been younger, quieter, watching everything with careful eyes. This man. "I remember," she whispered. "Your mother recovered." She did. She lived another 3 good years after that before her heart gave out, but she would have died on the road if not for your father's kindness. Isaac straightened his shoulders. "Let me do this. And if you lose, Castellano will own us both." He will not own me. I do not sign anything. But I will not lose, Miss Jensen. I am very good at cards, and more importantly, I am very good at catching cheaters in the act." There was something in his voice that made her believe him. A certainty that had nothing to do with arrogance and everything to do with experience. She found herself nodding before she fully thought it through, because what choice did she have? Report to Castellano's ranch in the morning and spend the next 5 years as little better than a slave, or let this stranger try to win her back. "What do I need to do?" she asked. "Go home. Pack your things like you are planning to leave tomorrow. If this goes wrong, you will need to run and run fast. Head north towards San Francisco and do not look back. But if it goes right, I will meet you at your ranch by sunrise with that contract. And if you do not come," his smile was small and sad, "then I am probably dead, and you should definitely run." Isaac tipped his hat to her and turned back toward the saloon entrance. Delilah wanted to call him back, to tell him not to risk himself for her, but the words stuck in her throat. She needed this. Needed someone to fight for her when she had no fight left. So she watched him disappear through the swinging doors, then made her way to the horse she had tied outside the general store. The ride back to her ranch took 30 minutes in the dark, following the road that wound through the coastal hills. The small house and barn her father had built looked skeletal in the moonlight, reminders of everything she stood to lose. She lit a lamp inside and began to pack, though her hands kept shaking and her mind kept returning to the saloon, wondering what was happening, whether Isaac Armitage was as good as his quiet confidence suggested. She tried to sleep, but could not, so she sat on the porch with a rifle across her lap, watching the eastern horizon for any sign of dawn. The night sounds of California summer surrounded her: crickets and distant coyotes, the rustle of wind through the live oaks that dotted her property. Each minute stretched into an eternity. When the sky finally began to lighten, painting the clouds in shades of rose and gold, she heard hoofbeats. Her heart leaped into her throat as she stood, raising the rifle until she could make out the rider. Tall, broad-shouldered, sitting his horse like he was born in the saddle. Isaac Armitage, alive and whole with something white clutched in his hand. He dismounted before his horse fully stopped, striding toward her with purpose. In the growing light, she could see a bruise forming along his jaw and dried blood at the corner of his mouth, but his eyes were bright with victory. "You did it," she breathed. He held out the contract, her signature stark against the pale paper. "I did it. You are free, Miss Jensen." Her hands trembled as she took the document, hardly believing it was real. "How? Tell me everything." Isaac touched his jaw gingerly and smiled. "Let us just say that I caught them cheating, called them on it in front of the whole saloon, and when Castellano's man tried to shoot me for it, I was faster." The dealer confessed everything once he realized he was on his own. Castellano had to hand over all the contracts he had won tonight. Turns out you were not the first person he had conned. The sheriff finally had enough witnesses to act, and Castellano is currently sitting in a cell waiting for the circuit judge. Delilah felt tears streaming down her face before she realized she was crying. "You could have been killed, but I was not." He said it simply, like risking his life was no great matter. "And now you are free." She looked down at the contract in her hands, then up at this man who had saved her from a fate worse than death. The sunrise painted him in gold, highlighting the strength in his features and the gentleness in his eyes. Something shifted in her chest, a feeling she could not quite name, but that felt like the first breath after nearly drowning. "I do not know how to thank you," she said. "You do not need to thank me. I told you I owed your father a debt. But he is gone now. You did not owe me anything." Isaac took off his hat, running a hand through his dark hair. "Maybe not, but I could not stand by and watch you lose everything to a cheat. He hesitated, then added, "If you want the truth, Miss Jensen, from the moment I saw you at that table, looking so determined and so desperate, I knew I had to help. It was not just about the debt anymore." The air between them changed, charged with something Delilah had never felt before. She was aware of everything suddenly, the way the morning light caught in his hair, the width of his shoulders, the way he looked at her like she was something precious worth fighting for. "You should stay for breakfast," she said, the words tumbling out. "It is the least I can do after what you have done for me." His smile transformed his face, softening the hard edges that life on the frontier had carved into him. "I would like that very much." They walked into the small ranch house together, and Delilah found herself acutely aware of his presence in her space. She built up the fire in the stove while he washed the blood from his face at the basin, and they moved around each other with an odd ease, like they had done this dance 100 times before. She made coffee and biscuits, fried eggs and the last of her bacon, and they sat at her small table as the sun rose fully over the California hills. Isaac ate like a man who had not had a good meal in days, which made her wonder about his life, about where he had been, and what he had seen since that time 5 years ago when his mother was sick. "Tell me about yourself," she said, pouring more coffee into his cup. "What have you been doing all these years?" He swallowed a bite of biscuit and considered the question. "After my mother died, my father and I worked cattle drives up and down California. We went as far north as Oregon one year, as far east as Nevada another. He died 2 years ago in a stampede outside Sacramento. Since then, I have been drifting, taking work where I can find it, breaking horses, guarding freight wagons, playing cards when I need quick money. Do you have any other family? A sister in San Francisco. She married a merchant and has 2 little ones now. I visit when I can, but she has her own life." He met her eyes across the table. "What about you? Any family besides your father?" Delilah shook her head. "My mother died when I was 15. Fever. It was just my father and me after that, working this ranch, trying to keep it going. I did not know about his gambling until after he passed. He kept it hidden so well." "He was ashamed," Isaac said quietly. "Men often are, of the things they cannot control." They fell into comfortable silence, finishing their meal as the house grew warmer with the rising sun. Delilah kept stealing glances at him, memorizing the details of his face, the way his hands moved, the cadence of his voice. She told herself it was gratitude making her heart race, but deep down she knew it was something more. When the meal was finished, Isaac helped her clear the dishes, then stood awkwardly by the door, hat in hand. "I should go. Let you get some rest. You have been up all night." Panic fluttered in her chest at the thought of him leaving. "Where will you go?" he shrugged. "There is always work somewhere. Maybe I will head up to San Jose, see if any of the ranches need extra hands." "Or you could stay here," she said, the words coming out in a rush before she could think better of them. "I mean, this ranch needs work. I cannot pay much, but there is room in the barn and I can feed you. It would help me and you would have a place to stay for a while." He studied her face and she wondered what he saw there. "You do not know me, Miss Jensen. For all you know, I could be as bad as Castellano. But you are not," she said with certainty. "You proved that tonight, and please call me Delilah. After what you have done for me, I think we can dispense with formalities." A slow smile spread across his face. "Delilah," he said, testing the name. "All right, I will stay for a while, help you get this place back in shape, but only if you are sure." "I am sure," she said, and realized she had never been more certain of anything in her life. That was how Isaac Armitage came to live in the barn of the Jensen ranch, and how Delilah's life began to change in ways she never expected. Those first few days, they worked side by side in a tentative partnership, repairing fences and mucking stalls, tending the small vegetable garden and the handful of cattle her father had left behind. Isaac was a hard worker, up before dawn and still going at sunset, but he was also gentle with the animals and patient when showing Delilah how to do things she had never learned. She found herself watching him when she thought he was not looking, admiring the way his muscles moved under his shirt when he lifted heavy fence posts, the concentration on his face when he worked leather to repair tack. And sometimes she caught him watching her too, his gaze soft and wondering, like he could not quite figure her out. A week after he arrived, they were working together to reshoe one of her horses when her hand slipped and she nearly fell. Isaac caught her instinctively, his arms strong around her waist, and for a moment they froze, faces inches apart. She could see gold flecks in his gray eyes, could feel the warmth of his breath on her cheek. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice rough. "Yes," she whispered, though her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could feel it. He released her slowly, carefully, like he was reluctant to let go. The air between them hummed with unspoken things, possibilities that Delilah was almost afraid to name. She had never felt this way about anyone before, had never understood what all the fuss was about when other girls her age had giggled about boys. But Isaac made her understand. He made her feel alive in a way she had not known was possible. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the Pacific Ocean in the distance, Isaac finally broke the comfortable silence between them. "Can I ask you something? Anything?" she said. "Why did you wager your freedom that night?" "There must have been some other way to handle your father's debts." Delilah was quiet for a long moment, gathering her thoughts. "The bank was going to foreclose. I had 2 weeks to come up with the money or lose everything. I tried to find work in town, but no one wants to hire a woman for anything that pays enough to matter. I thought about selling the ranch, but land prices are down, and I would not have gotten enough to cover the debts anyway. That contract seemed like the only option. At least I would have been able to keep the land, even if I could not live on it for 5 years. That was brave," he said. "Foolish maybe, but brave." "I prefer to think of it as desperate," she said with a weak laugh. Isaac turned to look at her fully, his expression serious. "You know that contract is void now, right? Castellano cannot hold you to it even if he gets out of jail, which he probably will not for a long time. But the bank will still come calling." Her stomach dropped. In the relief and chaos of the past week, she had almost forgotten about the bank. "I have 5 more days. How much do you need?" $300. It might as well have been 3,000 for all the chance she had of getting it. Isaac was quiet, thinking. Then he said, "I have money saved, not quite that much, but close. Maybe 200. And I know a man in Salinas who owes me a favor. He might be willing to lend me the rest." Delilah stared at him. "Isaac, no, I cannot ask you to do that. You have already done so much. You are not asking. I am offering." He reached over and took her hand, his calluses rough against her palm. "Let me help you, Delilah, please." She looked down at their joined hands, feeling tears prick her eyes for the second time since meeting this man. "Why? Why would you do this for me?" He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then, very softly, he said, "Because somewhere between watching you walk out of that saloon and working beside you this past week, I started to care about you. More than I probably should, given that we barely know each other, but I cannot help it. I look at you and I see someone worth fighting for, worth sacrificing for, and I want to be the kind of man who does that." Her breath caught in her throat. "Isaac, you do not have to say anything," he said quickly. "I know this is all very sudden, but I wanted you to know the truth." Delilah turned her hand over so their palms pressed together, fingers intertwining. "The truth is I have been feeling the same way. It scares me how much I have come to depend on you in such a short time. How much I look forward to seeing you each morning. How much I want you to stay." His eyes searched hers, hope and longing written clearly on his face. "Then let me stay. Let me help you save this ranch. We can figure out the rest as we go." She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Isaac squeezed her hand gently, then released it to stand. "I will ride to Selena's tomorrow, talk to my friend. With any luck, I will be back by evening with the money." "Be careful," she said. "Always am." He tipped his hat to her and headed toward the barn, leaving Delilah alone with her racing thoughts and her hammering heart. Sleep did not come easy that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about Isaac, about the future that suddenly seemed possible instead of bleak. She had spent so long being alone, being strong, that she had forgotten what it felt like to have someone in her corner. It was terrifying and wonderful all at once. Isaac left before dawn the next morning, and the ranch felt emptier without him. Delilah tried to keep busy with chores, but her mind kept wandering to the road, wondering when he would return, if he would return. She told herself she was being silly, that he had no reason to abandon her, but fear was not always logical. The sun was setting when she finally heard hoofbeats. She ran out of the house to meet him, relief flooding through her when she saw his face. He was dusty and tired but smiling, and he held up a leather pouch as he dismounted. "Got it," he said triumphantly. "Every penny." Delilah threw her arms around him without thinking, hugging him tight. He stiffened for a moment in surprise, then his arms came around her, holding her close. She could feel his heart beating against her cheek, steady and strong, and she never wanted to let go. "Thank you," she whispered into his chest. "Thank you so much." When she finally pulled back, she saw something raw and vulnerable in his eyes. He touched her face gently, his thumb brushing her cheekbone, and she held her breath, wondering if he was going to kiss her. But he stepped back instead, clearing his throat. "We should get this to the bank first thing tomorrow morning," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "Make sure it is settled before they try to take action." That night, they celebrated with a special dinner. Delilah made pot roast with potatoes and carrots, and Isaac produced a bottle of wine from his saddlebags, something he had been saving for a special occasion. They ate and drank and talked late into the night, sharing stories from their lives, learning the small details that make a person real. Delilah learned that Isaac's favorite color was the blue of the ocean at sunset, that he had a scar on his shoulder from a run-in with a mountain lion, that he could play the harmonica but was too shy to perform in front of anyone. Isaac learned that Delilah had always wanted to see San Francisco, that she could recite poetry from memory, that she was afraid of thunderstorms but loved the rain. As the night deepened and the wine bottle emptied, the conversation grew more personal, more intimate. They were sitting close together on the porch steps, and Delilah was acutely aware of the warmth of his body next to hers. "Can I tell you something?" Isaac said, his words slightly slurred from the wine. "Of course. I have never felt this way about anyone before. I have known women, sure, but nothing serious. Nothing that made me want to stay in one place, but you make me want to put down roots, build something permanent." He turned to look at her, his eyes dark in the lamplight spilling from the house. "Is that crazy?" "No," she said softly. "It is not crazy, I feel it too." This time when he leaned in, she met him halfway. The kiss was soft and tentative at first, a question being asked and answered. Then it deepened, becoming something more urgent, more real. Delilah had been kissed before, clumsy attempts by boys at church socials, but nothing had prepared her for this. For the way her whole body seemed to come alive under his touch, for the rightness of it, like two pieces of a puzzle finally sliding into place. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. Delilah Jensen, you are going to be the death of me. She laughed, giddy and happy in a way she had not been in months. I certainly hope not. I have plans for you, Isaac Armitage. Oh. What kind of plans? She kissed him again instead of answering, and they stayed on those porch steps until the moon was high overhead and the night had grown cold. When Isaac finally walked back to the barn, Delilah floated into the house on a cloud of joy, already counting the hours until she could see him again. The next morning they rode into Watsonville together, the leather pouch of money safely tucked in Isaac's saddlebag. The bank manager, a portly man named Harrison who had looked at Delilah with poorly disguised pity the last time she came in, seemed shocked to see them. "Miss Jensen," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "I was not expecting you." "I am here to settle my father's debt," she said, standing tall. Isaac stood beside her, a solid presence at her back, and she drew strength from him. Harrison's eyebrows rose. "You have the full amount, every penny with interest." Isaac set the pouch on the desk with a satisfying thunk. The banker counted it out slowly, his expression growing more and more disappointed as the pile of money grew. When he finished, he looked up at them with poorly concealed irritation. "Well, this settles the matter, I suppose. I will draw up the papers showing the debt as paid in full." "See that you do," Isaac said, his voice carrying a hint of warning that made Harrison flinch. They walked out of the bank 20 minutes later with the papers that proved the ranch was truly hers again, free and clear. Delilah felt like she could fly. She grabbed Isaac's hand right there on Main Street, not caring who saw, and squeezed it tight. "We did it," she said. "I cannot believe we actually did it." His smile was brilliant. "I told you everything would work out." They celebrated with lunch at the hotel restaurant, a luxury Delilah had not indulged in since before her father's death. Over fried chicken and fresh bread, they made plans for the ranch. They needed to expand the herd, repair the barn roof before winter, plant a bigger garden. Isaac talked about bringing in some horses to breed and sell, and Delilah suggested they could take in boarders, people passing through who needed a safe place to stay for a night or two. As they talked, Delilah realized they were planning a future together, assuming a partnership that had not been explicitly discussed. The realization should have scared her, but instead it felt natural, inevitable. Isaac was her partner now in every way that mattered, even if they had not put words to what was growing between them. That afternoon, as they rode back to the ranch, Isaac suddenly pulled his horse to a stop. They were on a high ridge overlooking the valley, the Pacific visible in the distance, and the view was breathtaking. "Delilah, wait," he said. She stopped her horse and turned to look at him. His expression was serious, almost nervous, and her heart began to race. "There is something I need to say," he continued, dismounting and coming to stand beside her horse. "Something I have been thinking about since that first night in the saloon." She dismounted too, facing him. "What is it?" He took off his hat, running his hand through his hair in that gesture she had come to recognize as a sign of his nervousness. "I know we have not known each other long, just over 2 weeks, really. But in that time, you have become the most important person in my life. I wake up thinking about you. I go to sleep thinking about you. When I am working, I find myself looking for you, wanting to share every small moment with you." Her breath caught. "Isaac, let me finish," he said, holding up a hand. "I am not a rich man. I do not have much to offer except hard work and loyalty and a heart that is completely yours if you want it. But I am asking anyway, because I cannot imagine my life without you in it now. Delilah Jensen, will you marry me?" For a moment, she could not speak. Tears blurred her vision as she looked at this man who had saved her, who had fought for her, who had seen her at her lowest and decided she was worth everything. There was only one answer she could give. "Yes," she whispered. Then louder, "Yes, Isaac, yes, I will marry you." His whoop of joy echoed across the valley as he swept her into his arms, spinning her around. When he set her down, he kissed her deeply, passionately, pouring everything he felt into that kiss. Delilah kissed him back with equal fervor, her heart so full she thought it might burst. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying at the same time, Isaac dug in his pocket and produced a simple gold band. "It was my mother's," he said. "The only thing of value she owned. I want you to have it." Delilah held out her hand and he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been made for her. She stared at it, then at Isaac, overwhelmed by the enormity of what they had just committed to. "When?" she asked. "When should we get married?" "As soon as possible," he said. "Tomorrow, if you want." "I do not want to wait any longer than necessary to make you my wife." She laughed. "Let us at least give it a week so we can do it properly. I want your sister to be there if she can come, and maybe we can have a small celebration at the ranch afterward." "A week then," he agreed. But not a day longer. They rode back to the ranch in a state of blissful happiness, making plans and dreaming aloud about their future. That evening, Isaac drafted a telegram to his sister Margaret in San Francisco, telling her the news and begging her to come if she could. They sent it from the telegraph office in Watsonville the next morning, and 2 days later received a response. Margaret would arrive on Friday with her husband and children, and she could not wait to meet the woman who had captured her brother's heart. The week passed in a flurry of preparation. Delilah cleaned the house from top to bottom, made new curtains for the windows, baked enough food to feed an army. Isaac worked on improving the barn and the property, wanting everything to be perfect for their wedding day. They stole kisses in between chores, growing more comfortable with their affection, learning each other's rhythms and quirks. On Thursday evening, the night before Margaret was due to arrive, they sat together on the porch watching the sunset. Delilah leaned against Isaac's shoulder, his arm around her waist, and felt perfectly content. "Are you nervous?" she asked. "About getting married?" "Not even a little," he said. No, it feels right, like this was always meant to happen." He kissed the top of her head. "I am the luckiest man alive." "We are both lucky," she corrected, "if you had not been in that saloon that night." "But I was," he said firmly. "Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was just chance. Either way, I found you, and I am never letting you go." Margaret arrived the next afternoon with her husband Peter, a kind-faced man who sold dry goods in San Francisco, and their 2 children, a boy of 4 and a girl of 2. She was taller than Isaac but had the same dark hair and gray eyes, and when she looked at Delilah, it was with warmth and genuine happiness. "Isaac wrote that you are extraordinary," Margaret said, embracing Delilah like they were already family. "I can see he was not exaggerating." "I am just ordinary," Delilah protested, flushing. "Any woman who could make my stubborn brother want to settle down must be extraordinary," Margaret laughed. "Trust me on this." The wedding took place the next day at the small church in Watsonville, with the minister who had known Delilah's family for years officiating. It was a simple ceremony, no fancy dress or elaborate decorations, but it was perfect. Delilah wore her best Sunday dress and a crown of wildflowers that Margaret had helped her weave that morning. Isaac wore a new shirt that his sister had brought him, his hair neatly combed, his eyes shining with love. When he said, "I do," his voice was strong and certain, echoing through the small church. When she repeated the words back to him, she meant them with every fiber of her being. The kiss they shared as husband and wife was sweet and full of promise, the beginning of their new life together. The celebration afterward at the ranch was small but joyful. They roasted a pig that Isaac had traded for, and Delilah's neighbors who had heard about the wedding showed up with contributions: potato salad, fresh bread, apple pies. Someone had a fiddle, and they danced in the yard as the sun set, laughing and spinning under the emerging stars. Delilah danced with Isaac until her feet hurt, then danced some more, not wanting the night to end. But eventually the guests departed. Margaret and Peter took the children to the hotel in town where they were staying, and Delilah and Isaac were finally alone as husband and wife. They stood in the quiet ranch house, suddenly shy with each other despite everything they had shared. Isaac reached out and took Delilah's hand, bringing it to his lips. "Hello, Mrs. Armitage," he said softly. She smiled, loving the sound of her new name. "Hello, husband." He led her to the bedroom, and they came together with a tenderness and passion that made Delilah understand, finally, what it meant to truly be joined with another person. Isaac was gentle and patient, making sure she was comfortable, that she wanted this as much as he did. And she did want it, wanted him, wanted to seal their union in the most intimate way possible. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the sheets, talking quietly in the darkness. Isaac traced patterns on her bare shoulder, and Delilah felt safer and more loved than she ever had in her life. "I am going to spend every day making sure you never regret this," Isaac said. "I could never regret you," she replied. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, even better than winning back your freedom." She turned to look at him, cupping his face in her hand. "My freedom means nothing if I do not have you to share it with." He kissed her again, deep and slow, and they made love once more before finally falling asleep in each other's arms. The next few months passed in a haze of happiness. Margaret and her family stayed for a week, and Delilah enjoyed getting to know her new sister. The children adored their Uncle Isaac, and he was endlessly patient with them, teaching the boy to ride and letting the girl sit on his lap while he told stories. When they finally left to return to San Francisco, Margaret made Delilah promise to visit soon. "You are family now," Margaret said, hugging her tight. "That means you are stuck with us." "I would not want it any other way," Delilah replied truthfully. With Margaret gone, Delilah and Isaac settled into married life. They worked the ranch together, building it up slowly but steadily. Isaac proved to be as good with horses as he had claimed, and word spread quickly. Soon people were bringing him animals to train, paying good money for his services. Delilah started taking in eggs and butter to sell in town, and the income from their various enterprises began to add up. By October, they had managed to expand their cattle herd by a dozen head, and had repaired the barn roof just in time for the rainy season. They fell into easy routines: Isaac up before dawn to tend the animals, Delilah making breakfast while he worked, both of them spending their days on the endless tasks that came with ranch life. But they always made time for each other, stealing kisses in the barn, talking over dinner about their days, lying together at night and making plans for the future. In December, Delilah realized she was pregnant. She had been feeling tired and queasy for weeks, and when her monthly courses did not come for the second month in a row, she knew. The realization filled her with a complex mix of emotions: joy, terror, excitement, worry. She waited until she was certain before telling Isaac, wanting to be sure. When she finally told him one evening in the barn where he was brushing down one of the horses, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He dropped the brush and swept her into his arms, laughing and crying at the same time. "A baby," he kept saying. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" she asked, needing to hear him say it. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," he said, kissing her soundly. "You have given me everything, Delilah. A home, a family, a reason to wake up every morning, and now this. I love you so much." "I love you too," she whispered against his lips. The pregnancy was not easy. Delilah was sick for the first few months, barely able to keep food down. Isaac was incredibly patient, bringing her weak tea and crackers in bed, taking over more of the ranch work so she could rest. As her belly grew, she found herself getting emotional over small things. A sunset would make her cry, or Isaac bringing her flowers from the meadow, or the way he talked to her growing stomach like the baby could already hear him. "How are you doing in there, little one?" he would say, his large hand gentle on her swollen belly. "Your mother and I cannot wait to meet you." Every time he did it, Delilah fell a little more in love with him. In early July of 1884, when the California heat was at its peak and Delilah felt like a beached whale, the pain started. Isaac rode to town to fetch the midwife, a capable older woman named Mrs. Chen, who had delivered half the babies in Monterey County. She took charge immediately, getting Delilah settled and sending Isaac to boil water and gather towels. The labor was long and difficult, lasting from noon until well after dark. There were moments when Delilah thought she could not do it, that the pain was too much, but Isaac never left her side. He held her hand and let her squeeze until she thought she might break his fingers. He wiped her forehead with a cool cloth and murmured encouragement when she wanted to give up. "You can do this," he told her over and over. "You are the strongest person I know. Just a little longer, my love." When their son finally entered the world with a lusty cry, Delilah sobbed with relief and exhaustion. Mrs. Chen cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a soft blanket, then placed him in Delilah's arms. He was perfect, tiny and red-faced and absolutely perfect. "Hello, little one," Delilah whispered, touching his soft cheek. "We have been waiting for you." Isaac sat beside her on the bed, staring at their son with wonder. "He is beautiful," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "He looks just like you." "He has your nose," Delilah said, laughing through her tears. They named him Thomas after Delilah's father, with Isaac's middle name of James. Thomas James Armitage. He was a good baby, sleeping well and eating heartily, and he quickly became the center of their world. Isaac was a devoted father, changing diapers and walking the floor when Thomas fussed, singing off key lullabies that somehow always worked. Watching Isaac with their son, seeing the gentleness and love in every interaction, made Delilah's heart swell. She had known Isaac was a good man, but seeing him as a father took that knowledge to a whole new level. He was patient and tender, never complaining about sleepless nights or the endless demands of an infant. Margaret came to visit when Thomas was a month old, bringing gifts and cooing over her nephew. "He is perfect," she declared. "You two make beautiful babies." "We are planning on making more," Isaac said with a grin, earning him a playful swat from Delilah. "Give me at least a year to recover," she said. "Then we can discuss it." As Thomas grew, so did the ranch. They continued to build it up, adding more cattle and horses, planting a larger garden, even building a small addition onto the house to give them more space. Isaac's reputation as a horse trainer spread, and people came from as far as San Jose to have him work with their animals. Delilah started breeding chickens and selling eggs and chicks, and her butter became famous throughout the county for its quality. They were not rich by any means, but they were comfortable and happy. More importantly, they were together, building a life that neither of them had dared to dream was possible back when they first met in front of that saloon. When Thomas was 2 years old, Delilah became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and in the spring of 1887, she gave birth to a daughter they named Rose Elizabeth. Rose was tiny and delicate where Thomas had been robust, with Delilah's blonde hair instead of Isaac's dark locks. She was also much fussier than her brother had been, and there were many nights when Isaac walked the floor with her, singing and rocking until she finally settled. She has your stubbornness, Isaac told Delilah one exhausted morning after a particularly difficult night. And your dramatic flair, Delilah countered, but she was smiling. Thomas adored his baby sister, wanting to help with everything. He would bring her toys and try to share his food with her, and as she grew older, they became inseparable. Watching them play together filled Delilah with a contentment so deep it almost hurt. The years passed quickly, measured in birthdays and harvests, in horses trained and cattle sold, in quiet evenings on the porch and loud family dinners. Thomas grew into a strong boy who loved working with his father, learning everything Isaac could teach him about animals and ranching. Rose was more interested in the house and garden, helping Delilah with cooking and preserving, but she also had a wild streak that sometimes got her into trouble. In 1891, when Thomas was 7 and Rose was 4, Delilah gave birth to their third child, another boy they named Samuel Isaac. Samuel was a happy baby who rarely cried and seemed content to observe the world around him with calm, intelligent eyes. He completed their family, and Delilah decided that 3 children were plenty. "Are you sure?" Isaac teased one evening when they were alone on the porch, the children finally asleep. "I thought we could go for an even dozen." She laughed and swatted his arm. "3 is perfect. Any more and I think we would go mad." He pulled her close, kissing her temple. "You are probably right, but we did make beautiful children." "That we did," she agreed. "Life was not always easy. There were droughts that killed crops and threatened livestock. There was the year when disease swept through their cattle herd, and they lost a third of their animals. There were injuries and illnesses, close calls that reminded them how fragile life could be. But through it all, they had each other, and that made every challenge bearable." Isaac proved to be not just a wonderful husband and father, but also a pillar of the community. He helped neighbors with their own ranches, taught young men how to train horses, served on the town council to help make decisions about Watsonville's future. People respected him, trusted him, and Delilah was proud to be his wife. As for Delilah, she had become a woman of substance in her own right. Her eggs and butter were sold in stores throughout the county, and she had started teaching other women how to preserve food and manage their household finances. She was known for her generosity, always willing to help a neighbor in need, and for her sharp business sense that had turned their small ranch into a thriving enterprise. One evening in the fall of 1895, when Thomas was 11, Rose was 8, and Samuel was 4, the family gathered on the porch to watch the sunset. It had become a tradition, this quiet time together at the end of the day, and Delilah treasured it. Thomas sat on the steps, whittling a piece of wood under Isaac's supervision. Rose leaned against Delilah's legs, humming to herself. Samuel was in Isaac's lap, fighting sleep. "Tell us the story," Rose said suddenly. "About how you and Papa met." Delilah looked at Isaac and smiled. They had told this story countless times, and the children never seemed to tire of it. "Well," she began, "it was a hot summer night and I had just made the biggest mistake of my life." "You played cards with a bad man," Thomas chimed in, knowing the story by heart. "That is right. I lost my freedom in a rigged card game and I thought my life was over. But then your father appeared like a hero from one of Rose's storybooks." "I was not a hero," Isaac protested mildly, as he always did. "I was just a man who owed a debt." "You were my hero," Delilah said firmly. "You risked your life to win me back with a better hand. You saved me." "And then he married you and you had us," Rose said happily. "And we all lived happily ever after." "Not quite ever after yet," Isaac said, ruffling her hair. "We still have a lot of living to do." But as Delilah looked around at her family, at the ranch they had built together, at the life they had created from nothing, she thought that Rose was not far wrong. They had found their happily ever after, even if it was still a work in progress. Every day brought new challenges and new joys, but they faced them together, and that made all the difference. When the children were finally in bed, and the house was quiet, Isaac and Delilah retired to their own room. After 12 years of marriage, they were still passionate, still found new ways to surprise and delight each other. But more than that, they were partners and best friends, connected by bonds that went deeper than physical attraction. As they lay together in the darkness, Isaac's arm around her waist, Delilah reflected on how different her life could have been. If Isaac had not been in that saloon that night, if he had not cared enough to help a stranger, if she had refused his offer, or if he had lost the card game. So many moments where everything could have gone wrong, but somehow it had all gone right. "What are you thinking about?" Isaac asked, his voice drowsy. "How lucky I am," she said. "How grateful I am that you walked into my life when you did." He tightened his arm around her. "I am the lucky one. You gave me everything I never knew I wanted: a home, a family, a purpose. I love you more now than I did the day we married, and I did not think that was possible." "I love you too," she whispered. "Always." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, the way they had every night since their wedding, comfortable and content in the life they had built. The years continued to pass. Thomas grew into a fine young man, tall and strong like his father, with a gift for working with horses that surpassed even Isaac's considerable skill. At 18, he started courting a girl from town, the daughter of the general store owner, and Isaac and Delilah watched with bittersweet pride as their eldest began to make his own way in the world. Rose, at 15, was a striking young woman with her mother's beauty and her father's determination. She had announced her intention to go to San Francisco and study to become a teacher, a profession that was slowly opening up to women. Delilah supported her daughter's ambitions wholeheartedly, even though the thought of Rose leaving made her heart ache. Samuel, at 11, was the quiet one, always reading or sketching in his notebook. He had an artistic soul that neither Delilah nor Isaac quite understood, but they encouraged it anyway, buying him pencils and paper whenever they could afford it. In the spring of 1898, Thomas married his sweetheart in the same church where Isaac and Delilah had wed 15 years earlier. The ceremony was beautiful, and watching her son exchange vows with his bride made Delilah cry happy tears. Isaac held her hand throughout, remembering their own wedding day, how nervous and excited they had been. "We were so young," Delilah whispered to him during the reception. "We still are," he replied, though gray was starting to thread through his dark hair and lines had formed around his eyes from years of smiling. "We just have more experience now." Thomas and his bride, Emily, built a small house on the far end of the Jensen property, and Thomas continued to work the ranch with his father. A year later, they welcomed their first child, a daughter, making Isaac and Delilah grandparents. Holding that tiny baby in her arms, Delilah marveled at the passage of time, at how quickly everything changed. Rose left for San Francisco in the fall of 1899, and the house felt emptier without her lively presence. But she wrote home often, telling them about her studies and her life in the city, and she promised to visit during the summer. Isaac missed her terribly, but was fiercely proud of her courage and determination. Samuel continued to surprise them. His artwork improved dramatically, and by the time he was 15, people were commissioning portraits from him. He had a gift for capturing not just a person's appearance but their essence, and his paintings hung in homes throughout Monterey County. Through it all, Isaac and Delilah remained each other's anchor. They still worked the ranch together, though they had hired help now to handle some of the heavier tasks. They still sat on the porch in the evenings, watching the sunset and talking about their day. They still loved each other with the intensity and tenderness that had characterized their relationship from the beginning. In 1903, 20 years after that fateful night in the saloon, Delilah woke on a beautiful spring morning to find Isaac already awake, watching her with a soft smile. "What?" she asked, reaching up to touch her hair self-consciously. "Do I have something on my face?" "No," he said. "I was just thinking about how much I love you, how grateful I am for every day we have had together." She turned toward him, her heart full. 20 years, and he could still make her feel like a young woman in love for the first time. "I am grateful, too, for all of it, even the hard parts, because we faced them together." He kissed her gently, then more deeply, and they made love as the morning sun streamed through the curtains, illuminating their intertwined bodies. Afterward, they lay together talking about their plans for the day, the week, the year. There was work to be done, grandchildren to visit, life to be lived. That evening, Isaac suggested they ride up to the ridge where he had proposed to her all those years ago. They saddled their horses and made the journey in comfortable silence, the landscape around them achingly familiar. The ranch spread out below them, larger now than it had been, with Thomas's house visible in the distance and the main house sturdy and well-maintained. "Look at what we built," Isaac said, gesturing at the view. "From nothing, we built all of this." "We did," Delilah agreed, leaning against him. "And we are not done yet. We still have so many years ahead of us." "I hope so," he said, "because a lifetime with you will never be enough. I will always want more." She turned to kiss him, the California wind whipping around them, carrying the scent of wild flowers and salt air from the distant ocean. "Then we will have to make the most of the time we have." They stayed on that ridge until the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple. It was the same sunset they had watched countless times before, but it never got old. Beauty like that, shared with someone you loved more than life itself, could never become routine. As they rode back to the ranch, Delilah reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. A rigged card game that should have destroyed her life had instead led her to the greatest love she could have imagined. Isaac had won her back with a better hand, but more than that, he had won her heart with his courage, his kindness, his unwavering devotion. Their story was not a fairy tale with a simple ending. It was real and messy and complicated, full of struggles and triumphs, joy and sorrow. But it was theirs, built on a foundation of trust and partnership and deep, abiding love. And that, Delilah thought, was better than any fairy tale could ever be. The years that followed brought more changes. Rose returned from San Francisco with a degree and a teaching position at the Watsonville School. She eventually married one of Samuel's friends, a quiet young man who adored her, and they built a house in town. Samuel's art career flourished, and at 20 he moved to San Francisco to study at a prestigious art academy, though he came home often to visit. Thomas and Emily had 3 more children, giving Isaac and Delilah 4 grandchildren to spoil and love. The ranch continued to thrive under Thomas's capable management, and Isaac gradually stepped back from the daily operations, content to advise and teach rather than do all the physical labor himself. In 1910, Isaac and Delilah celebrated their 27th wedding anniversary. It was a quiet celebration, just the 2 of them and their children and grandchildren, but it was perfect. They had a feast on the lawn of the ranch, with music and dancing and laughter, and when Isaac stood to make a toast, his voice was strong despite the years. 27 years ago, I married the most extraordinary woman I have ever known, he said, raising his glass. She has given me a life beyond my wildest dreams, A home, children, grandchildren, and most importantly, her love. Delilah, you are my heart, my soul, my everything. Here is to 27 more years and beyond. Everyone cheered and drank, and Delilah stood to kiss her husband, not caring that all their family was watching. Some things were too important to worry about propriety. That night, lying in bed with Isaac's arms around her as always, Delilah thought about everything they had built together. The ranch was thriving. Their children were happy and successful. Their grandchildren were healthy and loved. But more than any of that, she and Isaac were still deeply in love, still choosing each other every single day. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Isaac asked sleepily. "For saving me that night, for fighting for me, for loving me all these years." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "You saved me too, you know. Before I met you, I was just drifting, no real purpose or direction. You gave me a reason to put down roots, to build something permanent. We saved each other, Delilah." She turned in his arms to face him, even though they could barely see each other in the dark. "I love you, Isaac Armitage. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, Delilah Armitage, always and forever." They kissed, sweet and tender, a kiss that held 27 years of shared history and promises for the future. Then they settled back into their familiar sleeping positions, wrapped around each other, and drifted off to sleep. The years continued their relentless march forward. Isaac's hair turned completely gray, and Delilah found silver threads in her own blonde locks. They moved a little slower, tired a little easier, but their love never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year, deepened by shared experiences and mutual respect. In 1915, as the world was being torn apart by a terrible war in Europe, Isaac and Delilah celebrated their 32nd anniversary. They were in their mid-50s now, with 7 grandchildren and another on the way. The ranch had been passed down to Thomas officially, though Isaac still offered advice and helped when he could. Delilah had mostly retired from her various business ventures, preferring to spend her time with her grandchildren and working in her beloved garden. They were sitting on the porch one evening, as they had done thousands of times before, when Isaac suddenly took Delilah's hand. "You have any regrets?" he asked. "About how our life turned out?" She thought about the question seriously before answering. "No," she said finally. "Not a single one. Oh, there were hard times, certainly. Moments when I wished things were easier. But I would not change any of it because it all led me to you, to this life, to our family. What about you? Do you have regrets?" "Only that I did not meet you sooner," he said with a smile. "But then again, maybe we met exactly when we were supposed to. Maybe we both needed to go through what we went through to be ready for each other." "Maybe," she agreed. "I like to think it was fate. That you were always meant to walk into that saloon that night, and I was always meant to lose that rigged card game so you could win me back." "Then I am grateful to fate," Isaac said, lifting her hand to his lips, "for bringing me the greatest gift of my life." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set over the California hills, painting the sky in the colors they had watched together for over 3 decades. Their children's children played in the yard, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. The ranch stood strong and prosperous, a testament to their hard work and dedication. As darkness fell and the stars began to emerge, Isaac helped Delilah to her feet and they walked inside together, hand in hand, ready to face whatever the future might bring. Because that was what they had always done, from that first moment outside the saloon until now. They had faced everything together, and they always would. Their love story had started with a rigged card game and a better hand, but it had become so much more than that. It had become a partnership built on trust and respect, a family created with love and dedication. a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. And every day, every moment they had together, was another page in the most beautiful story ever written. Years later, when Isaac and Delilah were old and gray but still holding hands, still sitting on that porch watching the sunset, their great-grandchildren would ask them to tell the story of how they met. And they would tell it, voices wavering with age but still full of love and wonder at the miracle of their lives together. "Your great-grandfather won me back with a better hand," Delilah would always say, squeezing Isaac's hand. "But what he really won was my heart, and I have been his ever since." And Isaac would kiss her cheek and add, "Best hand I ever played, best win I ever had." Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren would smile and sigh, knowing they were witnessing something rare and precious, a love that had endured through decades, through hardship and triumph, through every challenge life could throw at them. A love that proved that sometimes, in the darkest moments, fate would send you exactly what you needed. Sometimes it sent you a cowboy with a good heart and a better hand, who would fight for you, save you, and spend the rest of his life loving you with everything he had. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all. Not the ranch they had built or the family they had created, though those were wonderful. The greatest victory was the love they had found in each other, unexpected and transformative, a love that had changed two lives and created something beautiful and lasting. As the sun set on another beautiful California day, Isaac and Delilah Armitage sat together on their porch, surrounded by the family they had built and the life they had created. And they knew with absolute certainty that they were the luckiest people in the world. They had lost, they had won, they had fought and struggled and triumphed. But through it all, they had loved each other with a fierceness and tenderness that made every challenge worthwhile. And when their time finally came, many years later, they went together as they had done everything else in their lives, hand in hand, their love story complete, their legacy secure in the hearts of all those they had touched. The ranch would continue, passed down through generations of Armitages. The family would grow and thrive. But the story of how it all began, with a rigged card game and a cowboy who won back a woman's freedom with a better hand, would be told and retold, a reminder that love could bloom in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the biggest losses could lead to the greatest victories. Their love had started in a moment of crisis and desperation, but it had grown into something eternal, something that would echo through time as long as there were people who believed in the power of courage, kindness, and a love that refused to quit. Isaac Armitage had walked into that saloon a drifter with no real home, and he had walked out with the woman who would become his entire world. Delilah Jensen had sat at that card table thinking her life was over, and instead, she had found it was only just beginning. Together, they had built a life worth living, a love worth fighting for, and a legacy that would endure. And in the end, that was the truest victory, not just winning back freedom, but finding someone to share that freedom with, someone who made every day worth living, every challenge worth facing, every moment precious and meaningful. The story of Isaac and Delilah Armitage became legend in Watsonville, a tale told to remind people that love could conquer even the darkest circumstances, that courage and integrity could triumph over deception and greed, and that sometimes the hand you are dealt is less important than the person standing beside you when you play it. And so their story ends where all the best love stories end, with two people who found each other against impossible odds and built a life together filled with love, laughter, family, and joy. They had their struggles and their sorrows, but they also had each other, and in the final accounting, that made all the difference. The cowboy who won her back with a better hand had won so much more than her freedom. He had won her heart, her soul, her forever. And she had given him the same in return, creating a love story for the ages, a testament to the power of fate, courage, and the transformative magic of true love.